Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Flood. I'm a radiographer and healthcare educator in California. I am here to talk to you guys today about some of the psychological effects of emergencies. I'm really gearing this towards how medical assistants and the medical personnel in an office would be responding to an emergency. All of this really does apply to things that we have to think about with medical emergencies as well. But the context we're using today is the context of disasters. So let's take a look. The way we categorize disasters, at least from my standpoint, is that there are really two categories. You have natural disasters or man-made disasters. So, two categories of disasters. Natural disasters are just that. They are resulting from a natural hazard. A great example are volcanoes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and hurricanes. The type of disaster you should be prepared for, of course, depends on where you're at. So this is geographically dependent, right? Where you live is going to change what type of disasters you have to prepare for. I'm talking to you all here from the central coast of California, and we have a fault line, one of our tectonic plates, right? The San Andreas fault line. So in California, we have to worry about earthquakes. If you live in the Midwest, maybe we worry about hurricanes and tornadoes. If you live in the South, we worry about hurricanes. If you live other places, we worry about other things. If you live in Hawaii, of course, we worry about things like volcanoes. So, natural disasters are just that, though. They're natural. They typically, things like this, can cause significant damage to the environment, significant damage to people, right, to us, as well as our buildings, our assets. So it leads to environmental, financial, and human losses. Human-made disasters are, again, just that. These are referring to serious damage, either directly or indirectly caused by people. Either intentional, right, like a terrorist act, or negligent, like you're driving it down the road towing a trailer and your chain is sparking, causing little fires along the side of the road and starting forest fires. That's negligent, not intentional. Either way, though, it's a human disaster. Um, Possibility for failure of human-made systems. Think of like engineering disasters where structures collapse. Um, so, good examples: fire, structural collapse, terrorism. These are good examples of human-made disasters. There's really two ways, you can respond to things. You can respond well if you know what to do, or negatively if you don't know what to do. So, positive reactions are those where we trigger the resources at our disposal and we try to meet the challenge ahead, in front of us. Negative reactions, when we don't know what to do, when physical and emotional resources are depleted, you don't know what action to take next, so the action will likely be a negative one, something that's not necessarily helpful. Disasters that cause the most serious psychological effects are those that likely occur without warning. If you're not prepared for it, it's gonna affect you more. Those that pose a serious threat to personal safety or have unknown health effects. I'm recording this in September of 2021, and we've just been through over a year and a half now of a worldwide pandemic with unknown health effects, threats to personal safety. We didn't know how this was going to play out. That's a worldwide disaster. Um, these psychological effects can increase if things have an unknown duration, like the pandemic that we're in, or things that result from malicious intent or human error, or things that involve a symbol, like the attacks on 9/11. That was 20 years ago, and most of us, we adopt that phrase, never forget, right? And we haven't, and we won't, and we really can't, right? Has caused such an effect on an entire society that we're not going to forget about it. They had a serious effect on us. So, talking about stress, the stress response. Well, stress is the body's response to threat or change. Um, the body's response to stress is to try to adapt to it. So we call this general adaptation syndrome. There's phases to this adaptation syndrome, to this stress response. It starts with this phase called the alarm phase. A student asked me the other day, what happens if we don't go through the alarm phase in a stress response? And my answer was, I don't know. It's a physiologic response. If we don't go through the stress response, then we don't have these things happen, and we maybe don't respond appropriately to a situation. I brought up an example of a movie called After Earth, in which Will Smith is the actor, and it's a sci-fi movie in which some aliens had come on down, and they were able to sense. They weren't able to see or hear, but they could sense fear. And he just so happened to be somebody who could mitigate this stress response, this fight or flight response, and these aliens couldn't see him. But everybody else, because it's a physiologic response, we go through it no matter if we want to or not. Everyone else was, able to be seen by these creatures simply because we go through this stress response whether we want to or not. So it starts with the alarm phase. The body senses a threat and begins to react. The threat can be real or perceived. Our body releases epinephrine. We think of that as adrenaline, right? Epinephrine is released, which stimulates our sympathetic nervous system. This is that part of your body that gets you all ramped up. Okay? Pupils dilate, heart rate increases, respirations get faster and deeper, bringing in more oxygen. Blood pressure goes up. You get constriction of blood vessels. You get more blood flow to the skeletal muscle and less blood flow to everywhere else that it doesn't need to go. This is the body preparing to fight or run. And of course, you've heard of this as the fight or flight response. If you've ever been in a situation like this, you know the feeling. You get this kind of tunnel vision. Your attention becomes narrowly focused on the perceived threat without an ability to focus elsewhere. After that initial alarm, fight or flight response, the resistance phase. The resistance phase occurs if the stress remains long enough to get out of the alarm phase. If the stress remains and the body adapts. Things that take hours or days, we see the resistance phase. Things that last for minutes, we can pretty well skip this phase. In this response phase, and this is the case during disasters that last for long periods of time, levels of adrenal hormones can stay high or go back to normal, depending on the stressor. After that, though, we get into the recovery or exhaustion phase. A lot of people call this the adrenaline dump, when you just feel just exhausted after something has happened. The parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the nervous system that really brings you back down, right, begins to regain control. The body returns to normal levels of function. If the stress persists, we worry about continuing ongoing high levels of blood pressure, ongoing elevated glucose levels, long-term increases in metabolism. Because of things like the blood pressure, we have increased pressure within the eye, fatigue, hunger, headaches, all associated with persistent long-term stress. So, chronic stress. Our bodies cannot maintain that stress response indefinitely, and that stress response takes energy that the body could be using somewhere else. So things like our immune system become compromised. We are more prone to being sick. So people that have a stressful lifestyle, who are under chronic stress, are likely to get sick more. This is one reason why doctors, when they want you to recover, they want you to go home and rest and relax, right? Reduce stress, because that lets your body focus on doing things like recovering, feeling better. Lastly, a little bit about anxiety, a little bit about managing anxiety. This is a normal part of the fight or flight response. This is, I think necessary, right? It's necessary if there's a perceived or real threat to feel a little worried or uneasy about the threat, right? This is often triggered by an event with an uncertain outcome. If you're worried, like you don't know how Oh, students, if you don't know how your, final exam's going to go, that can cause anxiety. If you're heading out to an internship site for the first time and you've never done one of these before, that can cause anxiety. Events with uncertain outcomes are likely to cause anxiety. Individuals who are moderately to severely anxious will be unable to notice details, not be able to think clearly. And the trick to this is if you know a procedure, you know the response to take when something happens, whatever that thing is in your life, if you know how to respond to it, you can keep your anxiety levels from rising, right? Anxiety goes up when there's an uncertain outcome. If you know how the thing is going to go, if you know how a situation is going to go, then you can manage your anxiety by never having it start in the first place, right? Never having to feel uneasy or worried if you know how things are going to play out. That really comes from, at least in medicine, that comes from knowing how to respond to emergencies, knowing how to respond to urgent and emergent situations. This can keep anxiety levels from rising. Severe anxiety. A student asked me when I was talking about this, the fight or flight response. I said fight or flight, and the student said, well, what about us who just freeze? Some people just freeze when there's something that is going to cause fight or flight. That's due to severe anxiety. This can immobilize an individual. It may make others anxious. And it comes with specific symptoms: it's anxiety attack symptoms, hyperventilation, rapid heart rate. The patient might not unresponsive as in unconscious, but just not responding to your verbal commands, just kind of not there. There's just the lights on, no one's home. Assist the highly anxious person. They're not able to pay attention to you, at least to everything you're saying. So give them directions in short sentences. Try to affect their breathing. One way to get the parasympathetic nervous system back on board is to control breathing, thereby controlling heart rate and bringing everything back to, closer to normal levels. If we're in a dangerous area, direct the person to get out of that dangerous area, help them move, right? We should take cover if we're worried about that. In any case, just the fact that we can be aware that there is a stress response, it's physiologic. Unless you're Will Smith in the After Earth movie, it's physiologic. You can't stop it from happening. You can do things though, like manage it. Right? And one of my favorite ways to manage these things is just to know the steps to take, right? Increase your knowledge of emergency procedures, increase your knowledge of, the protocols in your facility, and you will be less likely to be the anxious or alarmed person in an emergency. So hope this was helpful. Please check back next time, and I'll be adding more. Thank you.